Welcome back to CEOs of the Industry. I'm your host, Jim Eady, with Dr. Chris Gutierrez from SIVA Animal Health. And today we have Dr. Jason Hooker from AMVC. Welcome to the program, Jason.
Thanks for having me.
Been having a great couple of interviews here in the CEO series. I'm going to let you lead, Chris, today with question number one.
Thank you, Jim. Jason, we will go to your roots from the rural side to CEO of AMVC. You had an inspiring journey from your early days. What are the key moments that shape your leadership?
Yeah, great question. I think, I grew up on a swine and row crop farm outside of Williamsburg, Iowa. And growing up, I was always fascinated when the veterinarians would come to our farm, interact with us and our livestock. And that really started me down that path of wanting to, look at science and just look at what makes sense there. And so I recall a couple different instances. One in particular was a TGE outbreak on our farrow to finish operation, and I got to help participate with our local veterinarian in resolving that. And so that was extremely interesting. And as I went through school, I knew I liked science, I liked math. Those things are important as a veterinarian. And then in undergraduate with college, I played football, and I had an unfortunate injury where I broke my leg, and I ended up spending 17 days in the hospital. And so that's where I figured out that I didn't like the human aspects of medicine. And so I was going to go back to the farm roots and pursue veterinary medicine. And so I did that and came to AMVC 19 years ago. This is my 20th year. And was just given an opportunity there to dive into the business and start to learn all different aspects. And so from that vantage point, I guess, my leadership style has evolved over the years by just working from really the entry position and trying to get into every different aspect of our business and learn and understand and figure out how is it supposed to work and how do we make it work better.
Great. Congratulations on those 20 years. A couple of follow-ups to this question, Jason. You have talked about mentors. Dr. Derry Olsen's being called out here as somebody that had a big role in your story. Can you let us know what values have inspired you, and what values are you pushing towards your team and towards the community around you today?
Yeah, great question. And Daryl's been a tremendous mentor and friend. And from the outset, when I came to AMVC, one of my favorite stories is I walked into the offices at AMVC and I had 12 different resumes on resume paper, and I never took one out. Nobody ever asked me for it. So they kind of had known a little bit about me, and it was immediately, how do we sell you on us, and how do we bring you into the team, and how do we tell you that this is going to be a fit? And so really that mindset and that culture to where you're going to bring smart people in and allow them to learn and develop and give them opportunities so they can continue to grow and make the organization better is really one of those cornerstone things that Daryl instilled in me, and is part of the culture here where, that's what you want, right? Out of every employee, partner, veterinarian, whatever your role is, to be able to do your job, have that autonomy and the mastery to really succeed in what you're doing. And so that's what we try to do. And that's what I'm continuing to try to do as Daryl's retired and we continue this journey in the generational shift that's occurring throughout the industry and in every business, right? You get every year people get closer to that retirement age, and so you got to figure out how and who is going to step up and fill those shoes. And so that's something that his trust in me, in particularly in the last 5 years, as we worked extremely closely together, and I was just able to observe and take in and be a part of those conversations that have helped shape my leadership style today.
If you could distill the essence of AMVC mission today, what would that be, Jason?
Yeah, our mission is very simple. We just want to do the right thing every day. And that sounds very simple, but it's of course it's harder in practice, right? And so finding what that right thing is every day and not being afraid to we make mistakes, but the goal is we learn from those mistakes, we don't continue to make them. And so as we spread that message down throughout our organization all the way to the very first new person on the job, the most powerful question you can ask is why are you doing things this way? And so the new people in your organization, when they ask those questions, if we're open to explaining them or even looking at, do we even have an explanation? That's how we continue to get better. And that's how we do the right things every day when you're being challenged and you're open to that challenge from an employee at any level within the organization.
Very clear. Back to you, Jim.
So Jason, let's talk about the health challenge and kind of the industry in general. We're very resilient. PRRS and PED remain constant threats in pork production. How has AMVC adapted health strategies to help combat these diseases?
That's a great question. It's absolutely correct. Those are our two biggest challenges. And so on those fronts, we're trying to put as many barriers as we can in place. And I think a lot of the barriers today are just part of it's this generational shift in the agricultural world where the institutional knowledge is stepping out of the day-to-day. And so how do we get that institutional knowledge down to the people that are doing the work today? Don't have that perfect yet by any stretch, but I think that's a big threat and a big point of disease movement today is just the lack of understanding or the lack of communication or the lack of anybody even explaining how and why we do things to some of the people that touch our animals, whether it's a service contractor or the day-to-day labor. And so I think from an industry standpoint, that's going to be one of our bigger challenges. That's what I've relayed to the National Pork Board as they've come out and done these swine health interviews and the major threats challenging our industry. I think we need some sort of better playbook to reach those individuals that are, we have owner operators now that have stepped out of the day-to-day. They're managing employees or contractors or whatever the case may be. How do we bridge that gap? Because when a lot of the industry, as a veterinary professional, if I'm talking to a farm owner, that farm owner may not be in his operation on a day-to-day basis. So how do you reach the person that's actually going to have the influence at that level from a biosecurity standpoint? So I think, just the broad playbook of biosecurity things that you can put into place that make sense to me today. I think filtering sow farms has a place. I think feed mitigants have a place. I think a thoughtful approach to how we manage mortality removal, supply entry, people movement. It's basic things, but as we've moved on in the years here, the people that had the deep understanding and experienced some of the devastating diseases like circovirus that now we can control, those people aren't in the day-to-day. And so today, the people experiencing those really challenging moments they're dealing with PRRS and they're dealing with PED and really the best response there is going to be prevention. And so how do we put more barriers in place to prevent those from occurring and hopefully having a better outcome?
Well, part of that, Jason, like you said, is prevention, biosecurity. Outside of that, is there anything you're prepping for future health challenges? And then secondly, are there any new tools that AMVC is using to stay ahead of disease risk?
Yeah, from a tool standpoint, we are moving down the path of investing in filtration and in positive pressure filtration, because a lot of these are existing facilities today that we think that's going to give us the best chance on that front. We are investing in feed mitigation technologies, putting those in place, and then just looking at a farm specific kind of a biosecurity plan. So I call it a prescription for every farm, because none of our farms are built the same. They all look a little different. They all operate a little different. So there's just so many different nuances to each farm that I think it has to be specific to that farm. And so that's why I call it, it's a prescription. It's a plan for how does your farm operate, and then that's got to be communicated to anybody that's going to visit or come to that farm. And so that's how we're trying to move the needle on two very frustrating diseases that sometimes it feels like you can't move the needle on.
So I'll pass this on to you, Chris.
So I will go back to the people and to the talent and to the fact that we are recruiting as an industry the next generation. So labor continues to be a challenge, regardless of what zone in the world we're looking at. Having the right quality and quantity of people in the farm remains a challenge. So how are we managing the generational shift from your perspective, Jason? How do we entice, make compelling for the next wave of talent to engage in swine, especially in rural America?
Great question. And, today, with a more positive market outlook, that helps, but having coming through the last 2 years where, depressed economic conditions makes things tough. From a recruitment standpoint, we in especially rural America, you have to go out and bring people here to where we are. And you have to have something for those people to do because this new generation of workforce, they want a work-life balance. They want some amenities. And those things can't exist in rural America, but talented people aren't going to look at the map and say, or even consider it until you go get them. So we advise, even our local community businesses and school systems to, you have to go out and bring the people to where you are and show them that this way of life is rewarding, both personally, financially, and just in the community. And so that's a really important aspect, I think, of how rural communities need to look at it differently. I call it a privilege to drive through a lot of rural communities, and some are thriving and some are not. And I think it's, the ones that are not haven't taken the initiative to go out and seek not only businesses, but even if the business is there, to bring people to those communities and show them what it's all about and give them an opportunity to experience life in rural America, which can and is very rewarding once you've experienced it. But we have to become salesmen on that front too.
To stay active, listen to their needs, advocate, educate, welcome them. So once we have them, once they have engaged, enter the industry, how are we developing them from your perspective, Jason? What we should be doing better or differently to keep the pipeline of talent strong?
I think we got to continue to provide opportunities for growth, whether it's just growth in knowledge or advancement in positions, but being open to having new people come in, have ideas, do some trial and error, allow them to have that bit of, it starts with they got to understand the purpose, allow them to really specialize in something, and then give them the opportunity to go do it. And I think that's how you keep people within your organization. It keeps people motivated. It keeps people excited for coming to work every day when they can have that level of involvement. And it's a process and an evolving curve, but being open to that as a company and an organization is going to keep those people with you longer, and as you start to develop that trust soon becomes loyalty. And then now you've got people that are committed and sticking in your organization.
Let me continue on this path of leadership with a different question about organizational structure and leadership philosophy. So how would you define your structure and the leadership style, the things that you're pushing for in AMVC? And can you explain how they are different or better than the traditional models of the industry?
Yeah, so I think one area that we're unique in is we have a lot of partners. We have 17 partners. And then we've got various other people in leadership positions. And so I would describe our leadership approach as more flat, in meaning that, well, well, I might be the managing partner and CEO. I'm not responsible for making every decision. People aren't running every decision by me. I have a lot of knowledge of what's going on, but I also have a lot of trust and confidence and faith in the people that we have working every day, that they're making the right decisions. And so then it becomes more of my goal is to provide the context and clarity to the rest of the group and what's going on in the various aspects of our business, and input and instruction when needed. But really it's just guiding those communications between the different groups within our organization so that we all understand what's going on. And then, like I said before, when you have smart people doing really smart things, it becomes pretty easy. And it's a harder journey to get to that point, but having that structure to where people are empowered to make decisions. If there's a mistake made, we learn from that mistake. We're not punitive in the response. It's just, let's learn from it, make sure everybody understands what happened and why, and then move on and be better because of it. And so that mindset is maybe a little different than some structures where, things have to go up a chain of command, and in our opinion, that makes an organization a little more clunky, a little slower. Sometimes people are afraid to express ideas and thoughts. And so I think you can move slower than necessary. So, and then at the same time, the challenge with our model would be, people want to know, right? So it's going to be my job to be communicating and disseminating information so that others understand what's happening, that maybe they're not directly touching, but they can have confidence in too. And so it's really an exercise in effective communication and ensuring that everybody's on the same page, and providing the context for why things happened, or why this failed, or why this was successful, and then spreading that knowledge across everybody so that we are collectively getting better and smarter and more efficient.
So you have explained there, driving accountability, keeping the agility, the innovation, not being punitive on the mistakes, embracing the mistakes, continuing with the learnings. All that's very clear. And you have also described what's working for you, managing a large and decentralized team. That gives a good perspective of the day-to-day. My follow-up question for you would be, what about the long-term, mid-term? How do you keep people and the day-to-day aligned towards the more strategic outlook of the organization?
Yeah, great question. So that does become my number one challenge and focus. And that's where, really I'm a big proponent of 99% of most every problem is in communication. There's a communication failure somewhere, and whether that's it wasn't communicated clearly or correctly, or the perception of what was communicated is taken in a different way than what the communication was intent to be. And so my communication and what I try to push through all levels of our organization is, communication is complicated, right? There's people have expectations of how they want to be communicated to, and when and how, and we all have different preferences on that. And so the one thing that we routinely talk about is sometimes you have to step back and understand that it's not really about you. It's about how do we as a group function. And sometimes you have to flex, right? So you have to have the ability to understand that if you understand the process of how things flow, sometimes people get in stressful situations, and so they ask for things that in maybe not the most friendly way. Well, if we can understand that it's not a personal attack and it's just a situational thing, then the communication starts to flow a lot better. So and it's very easy to talk about. It's much harder to do in practice, especially when you've got many employees doing different things. But as you get the employees starting to see the bigger picture and understand how their job impacts the next person's job, and that person's job impacts this person's, as they see and understand the chain of events, they understand why communication is so important, and why sometimes you got to give a little grace when communication doesn't work like it should, or was misused or not used. And so those are the things that I'm pushing on a day-to-day basis through our organization, trying to help people understand that not to get caught up in that aspect of it, and get back onto how do we make it work, how do we learn from it, and how do we continue to do the right things every day.
Over communicate and make sure that nobody gets left behind. Very clear.
Correct.
Up to you, Jim.
So Jason, let's talk about rethinking sow location strategy. A few years ago, AMVC began moving sows to the outskirts of the Corn Belt for various health reasons. Has that strategy changed?
Yeah, so great question. And that was the model, right? So we were going to take our sows, our most vulnerable population, take them to the fringe of the Corn Belt, accept the higher costs in feed and transportation, deal with some of the logistical challenges of having, employees and relationships at a distance. And that was the model until about 12 months ago when with the disease pressures, particularly PRRS and PED, showing up in areas where it's never been for reasons we can't explain. In our mind, it's changed that model a little bit to where I think it's bringing some value back to some farms that are within the Corn Belt. And so we're working diligently on that now to put those barriers I spoke about before in place from a biosecurity standpoint, and then take advantage of the better corn basis and feed costs that you can get. Take advantage of the transportation efficiencies that it creates. Because in all honesty, when you have a disease challenge and a significant one like PRRS or PED in a distant farm, it's harder to manage, right? It's harder to move pigs quickly in a PED break when they're hours and hours away from their destination. So that's been a learning in the last 2 years, especially as these viruses have found their way to remote locations that have long histories of no disease. Now it's something to at least consider, I think. And so I'd encourage the industry to look at that and say some of the obsolete facilities are what we're deeming obsolete maybe have some value if we put some other things into play. And at the same time, we have to look at these farms that we put on the fringes of the Corn Belt. They're the newest and the latest. What just being farther away does not necessarily mean you're safe. So it changes that calculus a little bit. I think it's going to force producers to look at, do I need to make more biosecurity capital improvements because what we assumed was good enough from a biosecurity standpoint 3 years ago, today I would be hard pressed to tell you that is something that is going to help me sleep at night anyway.
Do you believe there are safe zones, or has that concept evolved?
I think that concept's evolved, especially with, just it's so strange. You can have an area that's been no disease for 30 years and then suddenly it's got disease and significant disease. So that's something's different. Not sure what it is, but I think that should make us all pause and say, do we need to relook at this model? And typically as a swine community, we're a small group. And so what is isolated in a friendly area in one moment can quickly become a dense area because it is isolated and friendly. So then we tend to just move in together. And so that recreates kind of some of the issues we've had. So it'll be interesting, I think, going forward as we look at this, and especially in economic times where there's incentives today to reinvest in farms and facilities that I think are going to make our facilities better, hopefully improve health in the long run, and maybe bring some value back to the denser areas of production to where maybe that was waning before.
So when you talked about facilities, Jason, can older sow farms in regions like Iowa regain value with capital improvements?
We think so. Putting having all the decks or all the cards in your hand from a biosecure standpoint, putting all those things into play, I think is going to give you an equal chance as what we would have called an isolated out-of-pocket farm. And I think that there's some decent industry data out there to back that up too. So others have been doing it for some time. I think certainly something we're looking at and promoting.
So let's talk about biosecurity again. You touched on it earlier in the conversation. I know you believe biosecurity is a smart investment, and you've made a smart case in investing in biosecurity that's more cost effective than moving production. What's your take on the right biosecurity strategy?
Yeah. So from a biosecurity strategy, I think again, it's got to be something that can be communicated to the frontline person that started yesterday, right? So that it has to be something that's simple, concise, makes sense. There's obviously some more sophisticated components of it, especially when you're talking about filtering and things like that. But again, you can hire and train and put things into place to help on that front. But really, it comes down to the culture on your farm and creating that culture of biosecurity and the understanding that while it might be easier to step out this door to go bang on that bulk bin that's hung up because I'm feeding animals, that's not the right way to do it. And having the accountability within the farm to where others feel confident to self-correct, right? And so that if you have that culture to where your team has the autonomy and authority to say, whoa, no, we don't do that. That's the level I think we got to get to. And again, it's oversimplification as it comes down to communication, but that's exactly what it is. We have to be able to communicate, and sometimes in multiple languages, right? And from different cultural understandings. And so it's not as simple as write an SOP and put it on a piece of paper and put it on the wall. It's got to be something that, it might be culturally foreign to some of our employees. It might be in a different language. And so how do we get that understanding of the importance of what we're doing to everybody within that farm? And that's really where I think you got to create that biosecurity culture. It's not a monthly checklist that you kind of abstractly think about. It's got to be this is a daily thing that is of super importance.
Yeah, it's a good point because corporate culture, biosecurity culture, are there interventions you recommend, Jason, from filtration, feed, mitigants, powders, incineration?
Yeah, I think so. All of those things are what make up that, we got holes in the fence and we're trying to make them smaller. And so how do we put all those things into play, whether it's, even thinking through and going and watching and observing and even participating in how do you get a 500-pound sow out of a unit if she's unfortunately passed on? How does that physically happen? What does it look like? What are we asking people to do on a daily basis that might be physically next to impossible to do in a biosecure way? And then what can we do to make that easier? Even mortality management. I mean, you mentioned incineration. I think has its place today. Doing something different than just the basic, worst case scenario would be rendering. Next one is, traditional compost. I think there's better technologies, whether it's grinding to get a better carbon to organic material contact that we know works extremely well. It takes a capital improvement to get there, or incineration to where we're not going to have any material there, so that our chance of something coming back out of that area, PRRS or PED, is that much less because we made this investment in that technology.
And what about balancing costs with long-term ROI when it comes to biosecurity upgrades?
Yeah, and that's where everybody can do their own math today. But when you have events of, the horrible PRRS breaks that if people are immune to that yet, that's very good for them, but their day is coming, is what I would say. And you do the math on those and you just say, we can't live with that. You can't live with devastating PRRS breaks or repeat PED breaks and think that you're going to be financially viable. It's just not going to work. So that math has changed also to where I think today with some of the very virulent PRRS strains we have, depopulation has to be the number one discussion point, because unfortunately, the tools and techniques we were using before to kind of mitigate and manage PRRS with these virulent viruses don't work. The mortality downstream is persistent and it's economically devastating, and you cannot weather that. So those are the types of things that I think the industry has adapted to, and if they've not experienced it, those are where your head should go first.
And how do solutions like Virox intervention tie into your approach, Jason?
Yeah, so I mean, disinfectants, we love intervention just because it's highly efficacious. Can still have some effectiveness even in the presence of organic material. For those reasons, it's our number one disinfectant of choice. Feel it's done a great job of cleaning things up. Even, you know, almost has a detergent type effect at times. So you're attacking biofilms and things of that nature too. So we like it. We use it. That's what we're using to clean up farms. And then also, within that biosecurity culture that I mentioned, just being clean, right? Within your farm, washing, disinfecting daily. If there's animal movements, you're cleaning hallways behind it and then disinfecting just to reduce and lower that pathogen level within the farm. The mental image of dirty pig farms is not the reality today. So our farms are very clean, disinfected daily. And it's that kind of, when you build that biosecurity culture, that's going to help you manage those internal disease pressures. And if something would get into your farm, hopefully can prevent or mitigate that from becoming something much worse.
So we'll transition a little bit from biosecurity culture to gene editing and the future of genetics. So you've
Yep.
spoken to me previously in a positive way about gene editing. And why are you optimistic about its future in our industry, Jason?
Yeah, I'm extremely excited about this. And I think as an industry, what my message is going to be going forward, and I'm going to try to push this out to the industry, is that we need to be talking about this as this is the next wave of medicine. This is the next, we speak about it in terms of technology. I think we need to stop using that word and call it more of a, this is the next therapy. This is how we're going to be treating and preventing diseases going forward. This is happening in the human world. My wife is an oncology nurse. She works with immunotherapies and gene therapies on a daily basis. And so it's more common and understood than I think we give credit for. In the veterinary community and the swine world, we are pretty poor marketers, and we're pretty poor about selecting how we're going to talk about and promote things. So I think we need some really a thoughtful approach on how we develop a message point on this. And I think the veterinary community can lead this from a science standpoint, because it is science, and it's science that people can believe in if they can connect it with something that personally matters to them. And so unfortunately, most people probably have experience with cancer. It discriminates against nobody. So as we talk about gene editing and what that is, I think if there's a more thoughtful conversation about this is actually how we're going to be treating and preventing disease in the future. And really what we're talking about is a little bit of science and then just some selective breeding, which we've been doing for decades anyway. And so packaging that up into something that the public can look at and have confidence in, I think we can get there if we make the right parallels with what we're doing and we get away from it's a technology that's going to make us more money mantra. We'll have those detractors out there, but by and large, a person that's buying something out of the grocery store, which is paying all of our bills, they just want confidence in what we're doing. And so as we can be transparent, but in a way that makes sense to the consumer, I think this is the forefront of this technology. It's only going to get better. So let's make sure we don't stub our toe out of the gate and not have potential therapies, not technology down the road that other, whether it's people, small animals, equine, production animals should share in that ability to do these things too. So, but let's get the messaging right before we, tank something new and exciting like this.
So you talked about the next wave of medicine, the next therapy. Is there any other breakthroughs with gene editing that excite you, or did you basically cover it?
I think I kind of covered it, but because this won't be the last one, right? So we've learned a lot through this one. We've gotten something that's gone through the regulatory pathway to on the path to commercialization. So what's next? That's what the super exciting thing is. What could we do next? And I think that will come as long as we don't mess the rollout and the delivery of the first one that we have here.
So I know Chris talked to you about recruitment earlier in the segment. I want to go back to one quote that you gave me, touch on that. We'll let Chris wrap up the interview afterwards. But you said, if you want someone in this industry, go get them. So what does that mindset mean to you, Jason?
Yeah, that's where if you've got a need within your organization for something or somebody, you have to actively go find them. And and whether that's somebody with experience or even kids coming out of colleges or high school or whatever level you're looking for, bring them into your organization and give them the experience and show them what you're about. I always say I would take somebody green, inexperienced, you know, slightly scared, but with the drive to be there over somebody with years of experience, but stuck in a mindset where they're not open to change or looking at things differently. It's just such a better experience in developing employees and developing your culture when you have those group of people that are open to looking at doing things better, and making themselves better. But yeah, again, from rural perspective, you have to you have to actively search and recruit those people. So whether it's at universities or coming out of your high schools, having part-time opportunities for kids just to get exposure to your organization, that's what it's going to take to keep our industry vibrant and young, and with people coming back into it. And then, as you bring people into your organization, they see, we live in a commodity world where there's ebbs and flows in what the market cycles do. And, it's in 2 years' time, it looks way different. And the excitement and what's so great about the industry, it's back and people are excited and passionate and growing. And that's what you want.
Yeah, great input, Jason. I'll let you wrap things up, Chris.
We have discussed about many challenges, the talent race, the technology in front of us, how to continue educating the end user base. I would like to have a glimpse at the future from your perspective, Jason. With 165,000 souths in an evolving landscape, a changing industry, what is your vision for AMVC over the next decade?
Yeah, my vision is that, we continue to grow and we continue to provide opportunities for, farm families or even just new people into the industry, an opportunity to work in what is such a great and rewarding industry and segment of agriculture. So I think that's our goal, and part of that is then it's got to be something attractive, right? It's more than financial. It's got to be personally, professionally, and spiritually rewarding to keep people within an industry, and so we're trying to create that environment, and we're doing it today. I think we could continue to do it, but we have to be very intentional on, we need that next generation of owners. We have owners that are, they're doing the generational shift, retiring as they should. And so we have to ensure that this industry is attractive for that next generation to take that, that leap of faith that there's going to be a return for them by raising pigs. And I think it's there, but again, we've got to become our own salespeople, because there are certainly easier ways to go, or at least from a perception. So we have to make it look and feel like something that can be a lasting career.
With 20 years in AMVC, your contribution has been felt and seen. If you could fast forward the movie towards the end of the story, and if you could leave one lasting impact for the industry, what would that be, Jason?
Great question. And I think, I view myself right now at it's halftime of my career, right? I'm 20 years in, and hopefully have another 20 years. And when I'm done, I hope that the industry is a place to where there's an opportunity for young people. My kids are getting closer to that age of, is there something for them to come back to? I'd be overjoyed if my kids ended up in this industry, and I don't know that they will, but that there's an opportunity at least for them and the next generation to be a part of it, and that it's as rewarding then as it has been for me now.
Thank you very much for your openness, for your perspective on the industry, for your perspective on the challenges of today and where we're going tomorrow.
Thank you.
Informative episode, Dr. Jason Hooker from AMVC, CEOs of the industry.